journey to the Bay of Islands region in New Zealand was conducted in June and July 2004 by Tasmania's Jeff Jennings, Anthony and Jamie Ferguson, and tropical Queenslanders Deanne Vale and Grant Polomka. We had hired kayaks and gear from local paddler Mark Hudson. So what do you think of New Zealand weather?
That's the one-way bridge. Yeah. We might get to see some of the countryside one day. Hope so.
So a great trip. Good help. Yeah.
Monday the 28th of June, and we were underway. Today we were heading for Bland Bay, 25 kilometres to the north. It had stopped raining overnight and the sea was calm. The coastline here is volcanic, with loads of offshore reefs and rock gardens, as Mark calls them. Plenty of scope for a bit of excitement and fun, especially in plastic sea kayaks. You alright? Oh! Oh, you cowboy! As Deanne said, Jamie was like a dog let off the leash, exploring every nook and cranny. Maybe because he was paddling a plastic kayak and not his own fiberglass Greenlander. This volcanic coastline has many sea arches and caves, most of which we would attempt to visit in the next 2 weeks. This type of paddling was certainly a new experience for Queenslanders Deanne and Grant.
Okay, that's where I earned my money, $5. Let's have a lot of this little stuff for memory. Woo, man!
Jamie.
Woo! No, dude! No! I hope you got that on film.
I sure did.
That was excellent.
Hey. Hey.
Oh, very tough.
And a really yummy way to do it is steam them open.
Tuesday the 29th of June and day 2 of the trip. It was already raining and the wind was picking up. After some indecision, we decided to press on and head for Terahiki Bay. Mark outlined the plans for the day, mentioning that we had a couple of exposed capes to get round before reaching more sheltered bays. The swell had started to pick up and initially we had to punch into a stiff headwind from the southwest. The idea was to get Deanne beyond the headland where she would have a tailwind. However, it got quite interesting then, with swell waves about 2 metres and a wind slop on top of that. Tops of the waves were breaking and blowing off.
Keep going, don't worry about us. That's it, good girl.
Things were getting unpleasant. At one point, where wind funneled over a headland, I saw a water spout, which usually means 45 knots of wind. Deanne's shoulder had really gone on strike, and instead we headed for Ngāi Bay, with Deanne under tow.
We're just down home and hose at Ngāi Bay. We're going to pull in here and probably stay here for the day and the evening. Where are you going?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you little beaut. Woohoo!
A different color, that sort of thing.
See if I can lose it again.
It's no biggie.
That's it. Can't have any more.
We all had a good sleep in the batch at Ngāi Bay. Maybe it was Mark's chocolate fondue with a fruit salad dip. The rain had stopped overnight and we decided to walk up to the Maori Pa on the hill above the bay to scout the coastline ahead. Deanne was worried about her shoulder, but we decided to paddle only a short distance to Whangaroa Bay, so there were no problems. It was great enjoying the sun and calm conditions. This felt more like the holiday we were expecting.
Go down.
There was a small dumping surf at Whangaroa Bay, remnants of the previous day's storm. With a bit of careful timing, we all landed unscathed.
Yep.
The gorilla camp, as Mark called it, was idyllic, with two freshwater streams on either side of a valley. Views out to the Poor Knights Islands were panoramic. After lunch, we walked up to a Maori Pa site, quite a bush bash through the pahutakawa trees, silver ferns, palms and vines.
That's it. Just gets a hold of you, and you got to back off and unhook it.
From the Pa site, we could see Whangaroa Bay, which was an old whaling station.
And you could spend 2 hours right out to the...
Quite a fast trip back to our campsite, with Grant leading the way using his trusty compass and good map reading skills.
Out of the bush.
That was quick, wasn't it? Go up that gully, that's the way to go. Hey, no, that's good. Oh yes, this is real New Zealand custard.
Once you get inside, you talk next stuff.
Yeah, thank you. North Queensland mango. Wow.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a... What? Are those strips of mango?
Yeah.
Yep.
Lots of plans and counterplans, but eventually Jamie in a single, Jeff and Mark in the paddling perfection double were off to Cape Brett.
Out to the gate today. Through the whole rock and in the Cathedral Cave.
Woohoo!
There it is. Oh, you got to him first, did you? No wonder they look so satisfied. Things like them feeling cool, never had it myself. Special rare treat to see those New Zealand fur seals. We're very lucky. Hey, there's the lighthouse.
I can see it. Up to the hole in the rock.
Here we come for another full penetration. Okay. Named Piercy, and what the modeling name for the island is Motukokato. You gotta keep your eyes open for those fast boats, because right out here is where I've had trouble.
The wind was quite strong and gusty, especially after we had passed through the cave. The arrival of the tourist boat Exciter caused extra backwash, and we were glad to get into the shelter of Cathedral Cave. Leaving Cathedral Cave and the hole in the rock, we crossed back to the mainland to visit the Cape Rat Lighthouse and Cottage. We were now on our return journey back to Umahiki Bay.
Yep. Just breathe in. Just breathe in.
We had a fairly leisurely trip back to Wiwiki Bay, but Mark and Jeff were somewhat embarrassed about a capsize on a fairly innocuous little reef while taking a shortcut through a rock
It'll be a bit
garden.
of a tight fit for the double.
Only our pride and dignity were damaged, and we were soon back in the boat.
No.
On the way back, it would have been good to have visited the old whaling station in Whangaroa Harbour. Anthea, Deanne and Grant had spent their day exploring this area. However, it was getting late, so we cut across the harbour instead.
I've already done that. That's old hat.
Mark was leaving us today, so he outlined campsites and places to visit on our trip through the Bay of Islands and up to the Cavalli Islands. Our destination today was Urupukupuku Island. We paddled a short distance back to Tauranga Bay, where Pauline met us and ferried us in the van across to the Bay of Islands.
Where are we going? Why are we here? Okay. Ah, yeah.
As we packed fresh supplies for the next part of the journey, we realised that up until now we had been paddling on the sheltered side of the island. Weather forecasts had consistently reported gale warnings. Today we were going to take a taste of these winds as we paddle out to Urupukupuku Island and Otahe Bay.
Jamie. There's a rock just there. Look at the slog getting back out of here if it's not the right place.
As we turned and ran into Otahe Bay, the wind was gusting to 40 knots. Jamie was really missing his sail. The wind was so strong that we tied all the kayaks to a tree to stop them blowing away. Fortunately, Polly, the manager of the Zane Grey Otahe Bay Resort, allowed us to set up our tents on a lawn behind a fence. After using the washing machines and showers, we decided to check out the walking track to the other end of the island.
Have I got time at 45?
It was still blowing strongly as we climbed to the top of the island, but the views on all sides were spectacular. Pukapuku Island is pretty central in the Bay of Islands, so we could see everything, even Cape Brett and Percy Island, where we had been yesterday.
How to use all this food?
You've still got 3 bags in your boat or something, have you?
This is just so that you can teach people how to pack for sea kayaking trips.
Ta-da!
Oh dear.
The garlic on top.
Yep.
We're very well to
Those beer, do you have the beer sticks over here? Beer sticks?
He was ready to be challenged on it too.
Sorry?
Are you saying I can't do it?
Thankfully, the wind had abated somewhat next morning. We were heading east to reach Cape Wiwiki, about 21 kilometres away. The aim was to use the shelter of the islands to work our way east, so that we would then have a tailwind for the last part of our journey. We were enjoying a peaceful, relaxed morning, when suddenly
He might bite you there, Jamie.
we then crossed to Whangaroa Island, one of Captain Cook's anchorages, where we landed and stretched our legs.
Yeah, I reckon we can do it.
Good job Mark wasn't around, as we were carried into a rock slab by a surging wave. This necessitated a landing and a precautionary taping of the bow. Fortunately, it didn't leak. The eastern end of the island had some interesting caves and inlets before we left its shelter and plunged into a stiff headwind across the Black Rocks 4 kilometres away.
Pardon? There.
At one stage, Grant and I and the double gave Deanne a tow to ease the pressure on her shoulder.
Think there's any pollution in this harbour and Bay of Islands?
At Black Rocks, Jamie scavenged some mussels for tonight's tea before we headed to Howe Point on the eastern shores of the Bay of Islands. We now had a tailwind, and the rugged cliff coast offered us protection from the strengthening wind.
Long, isn't it?
It was getting late in the afternoon as we rounded Cape Wiwiki, so we didn't have time to explore Harakeke Island off the Cape. Instead, we had to find a good landing spot and a sheltered campsite for the night.
Strong swell.
Amazingly, just behind the campsite, a concrete road zigzagged up the steep slope. Mark had told us that the view from the top was worth the climb, and he was right.
I'll just repeat that for you. A kite from Whangaroa, warning in force. Southwest to 35, easing to 20 in the morning. Very rough sea easing. Southwest swell rising to 5 metres on the west coast. Fair visibility and showers easing in the morning in the further outlook is southwest to 15. This is Russell Radio, standing by.
Take us to some stones. Bring ginger away.
Well, the weather forecast was wrong again. No gales, just calm weather. Although we were heading for another gorilla campsite in Taku Bay to the east, we had decided to head back to Cape Wiwiki to explore some promising caves on Harakiki Island. The sea conditions were ideal, allowing us to enter all of the long, narrow caves and inlets. In some of the caves we saw New Zealand fur seals and penguins. One of the caves penetrated right through the island, and we could see Tiki Tiki or Nine Pit Island right through the cave. Finally, as we enjoyed the bright sunshine, we turned and headed east towards Taku Bay and Lion Rock.
I don't think the double would have made it.
Mark had told us that this stretch of coast is one of his favourites. It's sheltered and has heaps of interesting caves and coves.
Pretty good. As long as it doesn't get too big a swell and they hit their head on the roof. You got through all right? I saw your paddle vertical a few times. Whoa there, whoa, whoa, we're right in there. Okay.
We stopped for a lunch break just before Line Rock, an island just off the coast.
Looks a good one. Alright.
Jamie was once again in his element, negotiating every little nook and cranny. A bit of reverse parking was needed in this little episode, but at least the puffins are easy to manoeuvre.
Breather.
A chat with some local fishermen revealed that some very big fish had been caught, but unfortunately we had no fishing gear with us at this time. We did see a school of what looked like salmon close to the beach in the small gutter as we landed in Tapu Bay. The gorilla campsite behind the dunes was sheltered, comfortable and quiet. The Cavalli Islands were our destination today, a relatively short hop of about 12 kilometres, so we could take our time. While Anthea had fun getting off the beach, Jamie practiced his surfing skills. sea was again classy calm as we continued our detailed exploration of this rocky coastline.
I'll go in. Oop.
Sea arches and caves appeared in a never-ending parade of interesting things to do and see.
Oh, I've got a bad case of diarrhea there. A bad case of gas. It looks a bit like it, doesn't it? Interesting in a bigger sea. You didn't hit it. You didn't hit it. Oh, I was waiting for it. Yep.
By late morning, we arrived at Matari Bay and decided to land. I needed to make a phone call and send some postcards back to Tassie. The pies and ice cream were pretty good too. Anthea stocked up on some fresh bread. We were nearly back in civilization. The wind had picked up a bit and the weather was rather dull and cloudy as we crossed to the main island of the Cavalli group. We had planned to meet Mark and Pauline on the island sometime later today.
Shows it right here on the point, doesn't it? Where?
Mark had previously arranged with the New Zealand Parks to hire the newly built hut on the island. We had a code number which would hopefully unlock the cabin door.
Okay.
A slight technical hitch had us worried when we tried the code. But while Jamie went to check the combination number, I tried again and thankfully we were in. Motukawa Nui Island had a number of walking tracks, one of which led us to the highest point. Although the weather was closing in quite ominously, we could still see some potentially interesting paddling destinations for tomorrow.
Paddlers on the move.
Just as we arrived back from our walk, Mark, Pauline and a friend arrived and we settled into some serious cooking and eating.
Let's see, farm. Hey, in fact, there are apparently. Let's see, I don't know if there's much in here. Oh, yep, there's lots more frosting in here. So who's got a sweet tooth, Grant?
No, not that sweet.
The smell of bacon cooking made everyone's mouth water as we prepared for a day's paddling in dull and threatening conditions. All this in heaven too.
Yeah. And give it a go, I suppose. You got it.
Friend, we put syrup on 80 bread. It's not just not done.
Go this way, then as you get around the bottom end of the island, there's a lovely passage.
Which bit will we need to leave out if we don't get right around?
If you can't get right around, then I would definitely go this way. Yeah.
Because of the predicted strong winds and rain, we decided to only explore the western side of the island today, but there was still going to be plenty to see. Today Anthea was my new co-pilot, giving Grant a chance to go solo in a puffin. I really appreciate the extra paddling that Mark, Grant and now Anthea had done so I could film this video. It wasn't long before we were being entertained by some grey-whiskered New Zealand fur seals. They seem much tamer than their counterparts in Tasmania.
Grey whiskers. Really small, isn't it?
We passed the old 1940s farmhouse of the original tenant of the island. I think Jamie was trying to find the narrowest cave he could fit into.
Yeah.
Not long after Mark had caught up with us, the weather deteriorated. Conditions closed in quite rapidly as we headed for the northern end of the island.
Yeah. Nice and warm in the boat.
The sea conditions were still quite calm, so the weather didn't really stop us from exploring some interesting sea caves.
Just hold it there. I might just get a still photograph. Can we go through the end? Yeah, just stay there and pick up. Right, hard right rudder. And that's the next one. Just watch this surge. Yep, you're right.
There was little point in heading any further around the island, as the other side would be windy and exposed. Instead, we landed on a small pebbly beach for a lunch break. It was becoming quite miserable. Grant and Deanne were feeling the cold, so they said they would return to the hut. Mark had mentioned that there were some spectacular caves and tunnels on a nearby island, and I said we should go there. In these conditions, Mark thought I was joking, but I wasn't, so out we went. The rain and wind had really set in, but it was at our backs, so we scooted along quite quickly. First we negotiated a huge sea arch and associated channels, before heading out further west to even more caves.
Alright. Look a bit of a side swell up here. It's going to take us to the left of him.
Visibility was pretty limited, but it was an exciting ride out across to the island. Oh, for a sail.
West. Yep. Right. Higher going a bit.
The rain had resulted in miniature waterfalls cascading down into the sea, bringing with it plenty of topsoil. Even the cormorants were sheltering under the trees. We had a hard slog back to our home base into a still strengthening wind. Fortunately, it was only a few kilometres. That evening, the storm produced a spectacular sunset. As was often the case on this trip, the weather had changed quite dramatically overnight, and I got up early and walked to the top of the island before breakfast. Unfortunately, there was no more bacon today. Mark assured us that we were in for a treat during the next 2 days, with some of the best caves along this stretch of the coast. We did an open sea crossing to Pakuru Point, a Motukahiti island.
Bit of surfing practice coming up.
A short climb to the summit of the island gave us panoramic views of the coastline ahead. Slippery little devils, these plastic boats, eh, Deanne? The sea was still quite lumpy from yesterday's storms, but it made paddling that bit more exciting.
Ah, shit! I didn't want that. Just got all wet. Hey?
There is so much variety along this whole coast. 1 minute in the swells and backwash off the cliffs. Next in some idyllic cove under the Pahutakawa trees.
I thought it was round the corner. Okay.
I was rather surprised to see Mark indicating that this was our landing spot and campsite. It looked steep and slippery, and the campsite exposed to chilly winds. We landed, assessed the area, and decided to go around the point to a much more sheltered spot in Whangaroa Bay. Plastic sea kayaks are definitely an advantage for seal launching.
Here she goes. No problems. Here we go. rock in the middle.
After setting up our tents, we climbed to the summit of the par site behind the campsite. We lazed around in the sun and watched the gannets cruising the air currents. You watch him come right up to us now. Fine again today and off to Whangaroa Harbour, but not before investigating signs of habitation on the other side of the bay. Anthea decided to practice her Eskimo roll, and Jamie decided that Grant and I in the double should practice also. We all failed miserably. We got to the rendezvous point before Mark, so did a quick circumnavigation of this geologically interesting island. Apparently the island represents a significant event in geological history and is composed of very ancient rocks. Mark had arrived and we landed on the beach for a morning tea break.
reckon we can get through, don't you?
As we crossed the next bay and approached the cliffs, we noticed that the rocks had changed from volcanic to what appeared to be a very coarse conglomerate, full of boulders. Jamie found a refreshing waterfall and had a quick rinse and dry. Mark led us into one of the most spectacular caves in this area. It had 4 entrances. With the sun shining directly into the cave, there was some spectacular lighting.
Right, thank you. Rock right in the middle. Swing rider. Rock on the left.
The next cave was even more unusual. Long tree roots extended from the cliff top over the cave entrance and nearly reached sea level.
I think I'm going to get water on the lens.
A fine spray of water from a stream and a rainbow were the finishing touches.
You alright?
We crossed the entrance to Whangaroa Harbour to visit one of the longest caves in this area. The coarse rock surface and occasional side channels with currents made sure we stayed in the centre of the channel.
You're right to steer.
The last cave we visited was also unusual. The back of the cave opened out to a small pebbly beach, and above us was a skylight covered with vegetation.
I'll back up here and get a shot from there.
We entered Whangaroa Harbour, passing some weird rock formations to land in Ranfurly Bay Scenic Reserve for a well-earned rest and feed. We couldn't get over the magnificent sea cave coast we had just explored.
Very wishful, but a lot of people think they've seen them on the mainland. On the mainland of Stragan Point on Hinton, the channel side.
It felt unusual paddling in the confines of a harbour, no swell. We were heading up past the Duke's Nose to a 200 metre high waterfall. On our return journey down the river, we noticed a large grove of tree ferns. This is one of the few places along the whole coast where native vegetation remains. Then we headed into Waitapipi Bay and a tent site cushioned by a thick bed of kikuyu grass. Well, unfortunately this was our last paddling day in New Zealand, and we had to be in Auckland 400 kilometres away by this evening. The weather had again closed in, and we slogged into a headwind before turning and running down the harbour to Whangaroa. It had been a great 2 weeks of paddling and companionship. Despite early stormy wet conditions, the weather had been kind to us, considering it was winter. We had certainly appreciated Mark's local knowledge and friendship in our quest to experience New Zealand sea kayaking.
So one pig day, is it?
A great trip.
Yeah, very nice.